All right, today we're tying the Jiggy Micro Mayfly nymph. A lot of you guys who are watching this may have been using my first rendition, the Micro Mayfly nymph, for many years. I think it was one of the first little mayfly nymphs that came around quite a few years ago that had a very, very sparse, thin body and a kind of an oversized thorax and bead. And it came about one day fishing $3 Bridge on the Madison, and there was a very shallow, fast riffle, and the PMDs were just starting to pop, and I could see 4 or 5 fish in this really shallow, heavy riffle, just gorging on nymphs, back and forth, just picking them off, little mouths opening and closing. And it was a small one. It's late season. It was a little 18 probably. And my normal nymphs just would not get down to them fast enough in that fast water. And so went back to the tying bench, and that was before tungsten, but I thought, I've got to tie something that will get down quick that's still small. And so I just used an oversized bead, and it worked actually really, really well. So now 15, 20 years later, whatever it's been, we've got tungsten nymphs beads now, and they're just amazing. So I'm on this version of the Micro May, the Jiggy Micro May. I will be using tungsten, and it'll get down in any water. I've pretty much just use tungsten for all my nymphs anymore. It eliminates the need for split shot, and it allows you to fish smaller nymphs, get deeper and heavier water, and it's hard to beat. So tying this on a TMC 413 J hook. You can also tie on some of the new Perdigon hooks, the 210s that are really good, XCs. There's a number of them that work real well, but I started with this more traditional kind of jig hook, and I do like it. So anyway, using a copper bead head, using a ultra thread, Camel 8/0 ultra thread I use for an awful lot of my flies. Just kind of one of those threads it's not too dark for light colored flies, and it's not too light for dark colored flies, so, or vice versa. I do like some of the materials we can tie with these days. When I tied the original Micro May, I used pheasant tail fibers for the tail, and it worked great. It was what I needed. I was able to really flare them and get the spread I wanted for the tails. But these days we have Coq de Leon feathers. They have just beautiful speckling, just like the real mayfly tails. And so I've gone to using this for an awful lot of my patterns, smaller, especially the smaller beadhead mayfly patterns, and just a small clump. So it doesn't take a lot, just a little bit. And unlike the pheasant tail fibers on the original model, this I really don't feel the need to splay them or anything. They move very well by themselves in the water. Another thing I like about them, the small fibers, they not only look good with the speckling, but they move around a lot in the water too. Just a small clump straight out the back. And again, the whole thing with the Micro Mayfly originally was to get a very small, very svelte little abdomen, because the mayflies that we're using had that. They're very rarely. The real thing is their abdomens are hardly larger than a hook shank. So I kind of wanted to keep that in mind when I tied it, so I don't build up a lot of thread underbody. Maybe just cover a little bit of the basic materials that are there. But in the original pattern, I used just thread and with a rib, just a copper rib body. On this, I'm going to use a Polish fiber. It's just a stripped peacock quill. It's been dyed olive. And I'll tie that in. And again, I like to try to keep the underbody just about exactly with no taper. If any, taper a little bit towards the front, but just so it doesn't have a lumpy look to it. And on this, use a little pair of hackle pliers and bring this forward. And the nice thing about peacock curl is that it gives you a beautiful natural ribbing as you bring it forward, just slightly overwrapping each wrap coming forward. And if there's a negative to it, it's that it's actually very delicate. So an original fly just had a copper rib, but it was just a thread underbody. This guy, we actually want to use a little UV on it. Doesn't need a rib, doesn't need a wire rib or anything. The UV will keep it tough and unbreaking. Also gives it kind of a sheen and gives it a little bit of depth too. So it actually kind of gives it a look of like the real McCoy. Just a narrow little body, but with a little bit of UV, it looks almost like the real bug with the abdomen stripes glowing through. And the fish seem to really like this. I think it works even better than the original thread with the rib. They just love the look. And I tie this in a number of different colors, reds and browns and olives and just different shades, and they all work really well. Olive's maybe my favorite, but they all work really, really well. And olive is the one, as you'll see in a minute, is the one that I do tie with a dubbed thorax. The other ones, generally speaking, will use peacock, but I do like to keep the olive motif going on this guy. So, all right. Now, I'm a big admirer of another Umpqua fly that has a very, very slightly unique flashback to it. The sweet pea, just love that little nymph, works really well. Wish I'd invented it. But it has a mirage, a flash blue mirage wing case to it, and I really like the way it works. It's got a little bit more flash than the standard Flashabou, which tends to be a little bit translucent, but yet it's not just a flat, like mylar-y look either. So tie this in a little bit on top, back over it. Again, this will be coming over the top for the thorax. Get that back out of the way and ready to go. And then for the botting, I use the thorax. I use a Z-wing, a crystal flash, or a crystal dub, Z-wing color dubbing, or any dark olive will work well. Just kind of a dark, muddy brown olive. Again, I do use it's a kind of a little bit of an attractor nymph, but in an olive like this, it's a lot of times I will use it for a blue-winged olive. A little bit tighter. And again, this fly, it's like on the original, a little bit oversized on the thorax. Just something that I just liked. Kind of gives the feeling of a fly that's really just getting ready to pop open. Everything's kind of coming together in the thorax area. Come up here. I'm going to put in a few little legs, and again, the original had pheasant tail fibers for legs. This guy, I'm just going to use a little olive brown Zelon, and doesn't take much at all, just a little bit, half dozen strands or so. This side goes in. Pull those up, clip them, a little short of body length. And again, the Zelon is really a cool material for this because it moves tremendously in the water, just like their little legs kicking with just a little bit of current at all. So it's a cool effect. It's easy to do, and it works really well in the water. It gives you some material motion. Bring the Mirage over the top. Capture it. And then finally, going to end up with a little crystal dub, dark stone brown. Fish really like material, or they like contrast. There's very few things in nature that are just homogeneous in color. They're all olive or all brown or whatever you're tying. Most flies do have, especially nymphs, have a lot of natural camouflage, and they tend to have lights and darks and different colors that provide them camouflage. And so I don't like tying flies generally that are just one color. I like to mix it up a little bit. So that is the Jiggy Micro Mayfly nymph. Again, very thin abdomen, beautiful striations on it, just good little, just gives you that rib look like the real insect has. Tails and wings, tails and legs that have either the tail has a lot of natural modeling like the real thing. The legs move around a lot in the water. Nice wing case on top that will really pop. I think that wing case is pretty important. I really like it. It seems to draw fish really well. So, and of course that really heavy tungsten bead. So, small fly that drops really quick in the water, just one of my favorites.